When I talk to most people about my work in obstetric violence, they have no idea what that term means. Obstetric violence is trauma or violence against women during childbirth, labor, and delivery. And typically when I tell men about obstetric violence, their eyes get big like saucers and they say, that doesn't happen. But every time I tell a group of women about my work, at least someone in the group says, that happened to me. And more, I've seen women on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, posting about birth trauma, posting about how they're scared to go back to a hospital to deliver their second baby because of a traumatic experience that happened to them the first time they delivered a baby in a hospital. And I think that obstetric violence is going to be one of the next big areas that we see in law. It's a combination of med mal and tort law. And we don't have really clear defined legal claims to bring yet for women who've experienced violence while delivering a baby. Obstetric violence can be a lot of different things. It can be procedures performed without informed consent from mom. It can be procedures that a mom consents to, but then she revokes consent during the procedure, or the scope of extent to which she consented was violated. It can be tying women down, yelling at women, cursing at women, threatening women, withholding food, withholding water, putting on physical restraints. It can be hitting women or otherwise physically harming a mom while she's in the process of delivering her baby. One of the biggest cases that, in my opinion, jump-started the obstetric violence movement was brought by a woman named Caroline Malatesta, and she lived in Birmingham, Alabama. She won $10 million from a jury after nurses held her down for a long, painful back labor and prevented her from delivering the baby until the doctor arrived. And she suffered extensive nerve damage. She can't work. She can barely walk. She can barely sit in a chair. And she spends most of her time soaking in a tub due to the nerve damage that she suffered. Her husband was a lawyer, and he was in the room for most of the birth and witnessed the harms. Most of the money that Caroline was awarded by a jury was actually for fraud, because the hospital promised her that she could have a natural birth, that she could wear what she wanted, she could labor in any position, she could eat and drink during labor, she could have wireless fetal monitoring. But when she went to the hospital to give birth, it was a different story. And I talk to women all the time who say, they promised me one thing and I got another thing when I showed up. And that's why Caroline brought most of her claims for fraud, and not for another tort like assault and battery or negligence or medical malpractice or something like that that might seem to fit better. I think that obstetric violence is going to be a growing and a novel new area of law, because I think we're finally at a point where we can start sharing about what happens in the delivery room without the stigma that's traditionally been associated with childbirth. One of the biggest problems women have had in this area of law is convincing what was predominantly male judges and juries and lawyers that what happened to them was not within the normal confines of what childbirth should be, that it was an intentional tort, that it was something more than just harm suffered from having a baby. If you break your arm and you go to the emergency room, it's kind of a bad experience because it's really painful. Nobody wants to be in the hospital. It's not fun, and you have to wait. You have to get medication. You get a big expensive bill in the mail, and it's not a trip to Disneyland. But if you break your arm and you go to the hospital and they strap you in the bed and they force pills down your throat, and they won't listen to you, and they won't let you call your family, and they force you to have surgeries that you're screaming and kicking you don't want, that's something different. And I think we can understand trauma in a medical setting when it comes to an injury like a broken arm, but it's harder, I think, when it comes to childbirth, because I typically hear people say, well, that's having a baby, or, well, at least you have a healthy baby. And the mom's kind of sitting there like, yeah, but what about what happened to me? So I think that's why this is a growing area of law, because we're finally at a spot in our society where women can talk about what happened to them without shame and without fear that they're going to be ridiculed for telling about what happened to them in the delivery room.